Wait a minute. Did I actually enjoy watching a Sacramento Kings basketball game? Turns out I did. The Kings beat the Los Angeles Lakers 125 to 116. You know what that means? I get to do a positive episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. Let's see if I even remember how to do that. But the Kings making it easy to do that, especially based off of their 40 to 23 third quarter. The Kings winning this game off of the backs of their defense. Yeah, I'm saying that right. Feels weird to say, a little foreign coming off the tongue, a little weird, but it's fun to say, and it's going to be fun to break down this win. Fun to point out the great performance from Tyrese Halliburton and De'Aaron Fox. So much to talk about. Let's have some fun for once here on the Locked On Kings podcast.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of your Sacramento Kings from January through December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Check out prizepicks.com, use promo code NBA or go to your app store and download the app today. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I've been a Sacramento Sports Media member for the last 7 years. This is my 8th season covering Kings basketball, formerly for Sacramento Sports Talk Radio, now with ABC 10 News and Television. And look, it's been doom and gloom here recently on the Locked On Kings podcast. And truth be told, I really try to be a positive and optimistic person. It's just this Kings season and this Kings team has kind of sucked all that optimism out of me. But I got a little bit more I got a little rejuvenated with this Kings win. Now, it's always a little extra sweet, as Kings fans know, to get a win over the Los Angeles Lakers, even if we're still holding on to frustrations and anger of a rivalry that is almost 20 years old. But it's a win. It's a win at home. It's a win over the LeBron James Lakers, and it's how the Kings won this game that makes things a million times better. We have so many things to get to, from the performance of De'Aaron Fox, who played angry, alongside Tyrese Halliburton, who had a fantastic game. The Kings with their amazing third quarter. I do want to talk about the play of Malik Monk and comparing that to the play of Buddy Hield and whether or not Malik Monk should be a target for the Kings this upcoming offseason in free agency. We'll talk about that a little bit. Harrison Barnes, a.k.a. the Black Falcon, returned in a big way for the Kings tonight. There's a lot to get to with this game, and I guess we should start with the fact that the Kings snapped a losing streak. The 5-game skid is over and done with. And looking at the upcoming schedule, the Kings have a couple really good chances to build a little bit of a winning streak here. We'll take a small, tiny glance at the standings a little bit later on. I don't want to spend too much time on it. You know how anti-play-in talk that I've been recently here on the Locked On Kings podcast, because the Kings have to do a whole hell of a lot more than win one game against the Los Angeles Lakers for me to suddenly get back into the idea of the Kings being a team that belongs in the play-in, even if they have still a good shot at the play-in. But I will say, if the Kings were to make the play-in and the Los Angeles Lakers were to make the play-in, I would not be opposed at all to seeing a single elimination game between those two teams, with the exception of the Kings getting their ass kicked at home earlier on this season when the Lakers played without LeBron James. The only game that the Kings and Lakers played where LeBron didn't play, the Lakers wiped the floor with the Kings. The other 3 games, the Kings went 2-1, and all 3 games were very, very entertaining, from triple overtime game to tonight's game to the most recent game in LA that was back and forth, and LeBron went supernova in the fourth quarter. Like these games between the Kings and Lakers have been a lot of fun. So from a pure just basketball fan standpoint, if I'm looking for an entertaining matchup that the Kings have a good chance of winning, I think the Kings and Lakers in the play-in would be a lot of fun. That being said, LeBron James in those clutch moments, plus the Lakers are more than likely going to have Anthony Davis, unless he gets hurt again, knock on wood, back at that time. That would certainly not be a position where the Kings would be favored in any kind of way. But regardless of the play-in status and that dream that's still months away, we can focus on tonight. We can focus on the positives of tonight. And it's nice to take a break from all the frustration, all the bitterness, all the anger. And look, I know we've talked a lot about Sacramento Kings fans checking out and being indifferent towards this team. I know that many of them bought back in, at least for one night only. A lot of that had to do with the fact that the Kings played the Lakers. Anytime the Kings and Lakers play, it just has a little extra buzz around it, at least from the Sacramento Kings perspective. But the way the Kings played in the second half in particular, in the third quarter in particular, I know caused a lot of people to lean a little more forward if you're watching at home or whether you're at the game. People who might not have been watching, maybe following the game loosely on social media, seeing that third quarter, seeing the buzz around that third quarter, maybe sat down and turned the game on to watch the remainder of it. I know Kings fans, at least for one night, bought back in and were rewarded with what was a very fun finish and overall a very entertaining basketball game. So all context of the frustrations aside for both of these teams, really, because the Lakers have had their fair share of frustrations and disappointments so far this season. They're now 521-21 on the year. The Kings 17-27. All those frustrations aside, just a pure fun basketball game between these two teams. And now the Kings can look to build off of that momentum. But what they need to do is they need to take what they were able to do mainly in the second half, or mainly in the third quarter, but also in the second half as a whole, but especially in that third quarter. They need to do what they did in that third quarter. And I don't expect them to be able to do it every night for 48 minutes, but that needs to become the identity of the team, or the Kings need to try to do everything in their power to make that their identity. How they beat the Lakers tonight, how they played in that third quarter, that is how this Kings team should try to play, and that is who they should want to be on a nightly basis, even if they're not always able to execute it. Because that is where this Kings team is at their best, when they are playing hard defensively. They didn't change anything or reinvent the wheel or do anything phenomenal on the defensive end. They were closing out. They were playing hard. They were crashing the paint. The Lakers also went a little bit cold from three-point range after a red-hot first half, which also, of course, helps the Kings' cause there. But whether it was Davion Mitchell stripping Russell Westbrook, De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton just playing hard, moving hard laterally and horizontally in order to stay in front of their men, help defense, great communication from the bigs coming over and meeting guards and slashers at the rim. The Kings did a very, very good job defensively of disrupting what the Lakers were doing and then using that disruption to do what the Kings do best, play to their strength, which we've been asking for all season freaking long, which is getting out in transition. Defense leads to offense is an overused phrase in the NBA, but there's truth behind it. There's a reason why it's overused. When you are a team like Sacramento, who is at their best getting out in transition, it is very difficult to get out in transition off of made opponent buckets. And we know the Kings have done everything in their power to try and inbound the ball quickly. They try and do it on a nightly basis, but there is a big difference between having to give the ball to the ref and get it back and inbound versus getting the ball off a rebound and using the incredible speed of De'Aaron Fox and just going. And De'Aaron Fox was on go mode all second half long. That is how De'Aaron Fox needs to play every single night. And I know that is a lot of energy. That is a lot to ask from a player who already has a lot on his shoulders. But when De'Aaron plays that downhill, when he plays that angry, when he plays with a full head of steam, there is nothing anybody on this planet can do to stop him. There is nobody on the Los Angeles Lakers who had a prayer of staying in front of him. There is nobody in this league that can stay in front of De'Aaron Fox when he gets downhill like that. Now, I'm not saying De'Aaron Fox, the player, is unguardable, because clearly we've seen this season that that's not true. But when De'Aaron gets a full head of steam, when he gets downhill, when he gets out in transition, he cannot be stopped. He can't be stopped. And what De'Aaron has done, the biggest difference, well, there's a lot of differences in De'Aaron's game from when he was a rookie to where he's at today. But Fox has always been fast. He's always had that elite burst, that elite speed. But if you go back and watch games or watch highlights of Fox as a rookie, you could tell that in the NBA, he had a hard time controlling that speed, finding out when to use that burst, when to hold back, and how to come out of that burst and finish around the rim, even through contact. Now, Fox is able to do that with his eyes closed. That's why nobody can stop him. That is how Fox has grown while sticking with his strength. I don't think it's necessarily fair to or realistic to expect that out of Fox with so much on his shoulders every single night, all 82 games. You can ask for it. That's a difficult bill to fill, at least for a full game. But De'Aaron should be able to deliver that kind of effort, that kind of speed in at least stretches, if not quarters, on a nightly basis. But also, De'Aaron has to have the opportunity to play that way, which comes off of solid team defense. The Kings had some good individual defensive plays during that third quarter, but it was team defense that got the Kings on that run, led to the Kings outscoring the Lakers 40-23. LA had no answers whatsoever. And what I love the most is the Lakers and Frank Vogel took multiple timeouts during that third quarter. And when they came out of those timeouts, the Kings defense looked no different. The Kings even made substitutions. At one point, Buddy Hield and Alex Len came into the game, and I marked down the time. I marked down the score. Kings were up 11 at the time, and I went, oh boy, this is the final 3 or so minutes of the third quarter that's been really good for the Kings. Buddy Hield and Alex Len coming into the game, a slower big, and Buddy, who we know doesn't play a lick of defense, this could get bad. And the Lakers made a little bit of a push, got it to within 6, and really quickly, Buddy Hield hit a big 3, and the Kings got right back up to 11 points, which is the lead that they had heading into the fourth quarter. It was consistent regardless of who was on the floor. That defensive effort was there the entire third quarter, and it did not stop when the Lakers called a timeout to make adjustments. I loved seeing that. It needs to happen more. That needs to be the identity of this Kings team. Again, it's not realistic to expect this Kings team. They're not good enough defensively to expect them to be able to pull that off every single night. But they should be trying to do that every single night, because the reality is, with the exception of a handful of games, we have not seen the Kings try to play that way on a nightly basis. You can't tell me the Kings have tried to play with that level of aggressiveness defensively, leading to an aggressive attack in transition with that kind of speed. We have not seen that nearly enough this season. Nearly enough. That is what the Kings should be trying to do nightly. And I will take that. That is a million times more impressive to me than scoring 140 plus points and absolutely barraging the Charlotte Hornets with 3-pointers. Look, any team in the league can chuck up 30 or 40 3-pointers a game. And every once in a while, you're going to get hot and have a game like you had against Charlotte where everything is going in. That is fine, but you can't rely on that. And the Kings have relied far too heavily on the 3-point shot multiple times this season. And more often than not, it's gotten them in trouble because they are not a good 3-point shooting team this year. But they are a good transition team. They have everything that is there on their roster. They have all the means to be a good transition team. And to play to that strength, they have to play good team defense, or at least decent team defense in stretches. That is how the Kings play at their best. And that is what makes them, at least in temporarily, unbeatable. The Kings are extremely difficult to stop when they play that way in transition. It's a big ask from them defensively because, again, they're not a good defensive team. But all it takes is a few stops to get that team out and running, can change the momentum of a game completely, as we saw in this third quarter. De'Aaron Fox was huge. Absolutely huge. And he, of course, led the Kings in scoring with 29 points. Tyrese Halliburton scored 14 points. And you might see that and go, okay, compared to Fox's scoring, Tyrese wasn't nearly as big, but I beg to differ. I thought Tyrese was very smart with his shot selection. He did still pass up a couple looks that I didn't want him to pass up. There was one in particular in the fourth quarter when the Lakers were making their run. Tyrese had a good look at 3-point range, decided to pass it up for a better look for Marvin Bagley. But we know in terms of 3-point shooting percentage, Tyrese is a million times more reliable than Marvin Bagley is. So I want Tyrese taking that shot, of course. But to get 14 points from Tyrese Halliburton on 5 of 10 shooting, he was very efficient, 2 of 5 from 3-point range. And more importantly, to pair that with 10 assists for Tyrese Halliburton, you'll take that any day of the week, as well as a couple steals and a block shot. Tyrese was solid. De'Aaron Fox was very good, took 21 shots. I'm A-okay with him taking that many shots. We're going to talk about the great game that Harrison Barnes had in the next segment, because the Black Falcon returned in a major way for the Kings. Chimezie Metu got the start at center. He hit a big clutch 3 when the Lakers tried to make their run in the fourth quarter, got it to within 2. I think the Kings went up by 4 with a De'Aaron Fox layup. Then Russell Westbrook decided to take an isolation three-pointer, which, hey, Lakers, if you're in clutch time and you're trying to win a game and complete a comeback and you're going to let Russ take ISO threes, you're probably not going to be successful, and the Kings will take that every day of the freaking week. And then Chimezie Metu, who had just come back into the game after Marvin was checked out with what looked to be a hand injury. He got slapped on the hand pretty hard by LeBron. Chimezie Metu hits a huge straightaway three to really put this game away. So great to see that moment for Metu. He finished with 14 points. All 5 starters finished in double figures for the Kings, which is always good to see. Marvin Bagley did have a solid game with 16 points and 9 rebounds, just missing a double-double. And the Kings had a season-high 70 points in the paint, which you absolutely love to see. They didn't do a good job, again, forcing the Lakers to turn the ball over, only 9 turnovers, but the Kings did score 17 points off those 9 turnovers, speaking to how well they were able to get out in transition. The Kings finished with 23 fast break points, which is huge. So many great numbers that favored the Kings in this game that led to this victory. But I want to talk about the play of Harrison Barnes, specifically his return and how he got back to how he was playing at the beginning of the season, why that's so important for the Kings to continue to be successful, while that's very important for his trade value as well. And I want to talk about Malik Monk a little bit. He was very good in the first half, kind of disappeared in the second half, but comparing Malik Monk to Buddy Hield, I'll share with you why I want the Kings to go after Malik Monk and at least make him one of their targets in this upcoming offseason. That's all still to come here on the Locked On Kings podcast. But before I get to that, I want to tell you about our title sponsor, a little bit more about our title sponsor, Prize Picks. You may be hearing that and going, what is Prize Picks? I don't know what that is. Prize Picks, they have the best NBA daily fantasy prop game on the market. Prize Picks offers more NBA props than any other daily fantasy sports prop operator and offers all the superstar players as well as bench players who only record a handful of minutes each game. Prize Picks offers any prop that you can think of, from points to assists, rebounds, threes made, etc. And the way it works is you pick like 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections for specific numbers. So for Buddy Hield, let's say the over-under on made three-pointers is 4.5. And if you take the under or you take the over, you can win up to 10 times on any entry. And the best part is it's just you versus the projected numbers. So you're not facing any other shark out there who gambles for a living and who tries to take advantage. Prize Picks is so easy to play. It's easy to place bets. You can do so in seconds. You can also do so with multiple sports at the same time. And you can use their award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play right now. Prize Picks is safe, also offers fast withdrawals. Go to prizepicks.com today or go to the App Store and download the app. All Locked On Kings listeners who deposit money and use promo code NBA will get $50 free if your first Prize Pick entry scores a single point. That's right. All users that deposit and use our promo code NBA will get $50 for free, no questions asked, on your first entry if your entry scores just 1 single point. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. As former King Hassan Whiteside would say, the Black Falcon, returned in a big way for the Kings. And it wasn't just offensively, even though you're going to look at Harrison's offensive numbers and probably smile from ear to ear. He finished with 23 points on 9 of 14 shooting, 3 of 6 from three-point range, also had 7 rebounds, a couple of assists, a blocked shot. Harrison Barnes was very, very good for the Kings in this game on both ends of the floor. Hit some big threes when the Kings needed him, was a big part of that third quarter push that the Kings went on, of course, from a scoring perspective. But Harrison Barnes was phenomenal with his help defense tonight. Really did a good job helping on LeBron James, did a good job helping on Russell Westbrook. He was a major part of the Kings doing a better job rotating and communicating on the defensive end in that third quarter, leading to those transition opportunities. And with Marvin Bagley having the tough assignment of guarding LeBron James, which the reason why that is because the Kings started small with Bagley starting at the 5, and as of right now with AD out, the Lakers have LeBron James starting at the 5. So that's a tough ask for Marvin to try and guard LeBron when we know Marvin's not the best defender, period, let alone guarding the best player in the NBA. The Kings threw a lot of different looks at LeBron James, but there wasn't anybody who guarded LeBron more than Marvin did, and Harrison Barnes, amongst many other Kings, helped him out a ton in this game. So you get that boost from Harrison on offense, you get that boost from Harrison on defense, and it's no surprise when Harrison plays well, the Kings win basketball games. That's what we were seeing Early on in the season, when the Kings were 5-4 through their first 9 games, Harrison Barnes was leading the team in scoring. He was shooting almost 50% from three-point range, you remember at the time. And we knew those numbers weren't going to be sustainable, but we didn't expect Harrison to have the drop-off that he has had over the last really month and some change. And some of that had to do with health and safety protocols and him not playing and things getting a little crazy and irregular for him. And he's been trying to work his way back to that level of effectiveness. Of course, he's only been able to do it once in recent memory. You need to get him to kind of stack these games a little bit and get back to playing this way more consistently. But if he does, not only is it great for the Kings' win chances, it's also great for Harrison's trade value. And I don't think Harrison's value has plummeted since the beginning of the season, because most general managers will look at how he started the season and go, yeah, as good as he's playing, we know that that's not who Harrison Barnes is, and that's not going to be what he's able to do for an entire season. But I've shared before, and I'll share again, when I worked with David Locke, host of the Locked On Jazz podcast and Utah Jazz radio play-by-play broadcaster, when I worked with him when the Jazz were in Sacramento earlier on this season, he said on the broadcast that he thought that Harrison Barnes was the missing piece on a championship team. And there are going to be teams who are looking to make championship runs who might have interest in Harrison Barnes, even teams that are on the fringe trying to secure a playoff spot or maybe insert themselves into a deep playoff run. They could definitely use the services of Harrison Barnes, because Harrison is normally so damn reliable, even when he's not having the best of games. And I've been hesitant to say that I would be willing to trade HB, but at this point in time, everybody and anybody's on the table as long as the Kings are getting proper value. And if Harrison Barnes can get you a very solid young player and some draft picks, or a couple of solid players that can be legitimate contributors, one probably has to be at his position, because the Kings have no depth at his position. I know a lot of people have talked about using Harrison Barnes to go to the Atlanta Hawks and maybe get Cam Reddish amongst a couple other pieces. That's something that you definitely could consider. But if Harrison is playing well, that only means good stuff for his trade value, which of course gives Monte McNair and the Kings more options, as we are now less than a month away from the trade deadline. So not one game fixes all. The Kings beating the Lakers and us feeling good tonight doesn't mean the Kings don't still have a ton of problems they need to address, and Monte should still be aggressively working the phones to try and make the moves that are needed with this roster, because a guy like Buddy Hield, I still think, needs to go. Now, Buddy was the only player to score double figures off the bench, but he scored just 10 points in almost 30 minutes of action. Went 4 of 8 from the field, 2 of 5 from three-point range. I appreciate the fact that he only took 5 threes and only took 8 shots total. Some of the shots that he took were just weird. Like, he got an offensive rebound, dribbled out to the three-point range, and just shot a ridiculous early in the shot clock turnaround jumper for no reason when Tyrese Halliburton was right there asking for the ball. But he will continue to have moments like that that make you want to pull your hair out. And there was a moment captured in the third quarter, late in the third quarter, when the Lakers were trying to stop the Kings run, where the camera caught Alvin Gentry with some pretty heated words for Buddy Hield. Now, Buddy was also going back at Gentry, and before you misinterpret this as the two of them were fighting or arguing, it wasn't anything like that. It was passionate coaching from Gentry, and Buddy was probably pleading his case. This is common. This happens all the time in the NBA. We don't have to read too far into it. I just like to see that accountability from Alvin Gentry, and I want to see that more, not just with Buddy, but with everybody. And Buddy was fine, but you compare how Buddy plays to how Malik Monk plays. Malik has had the edge in pretty much every matchup between these two teams so far this season. Now, Malik is having a great year. He was paid only like a $1 million contract, or just over $1 million or something like that, a very cheap contract, and he's become a primary contributor for the Los Angeles Lakers. He had 22 points tonight, 7 of 13 from the field, 6 of 9 from three-point range. A lot of those buckets came in the first half. He was on fire to start this game. And of course, Malik Monk is a former teammate of De'Aaron Fox. The two of them came into the NBA together out of Kentucky. So Malik Monk, and comparing him to Buddy Hield, first off, he's a whole hell of a lot cheaper. That's number one. Number two is, not only can Malik Monk give you the consistent three-point shooting that you both expect and want out of Buddy that he hasn't been able to deliver this season, Malik Monk also gives you a little bit more as a playmaker, I think, and gives you a little bit more as a defender. Not a whole hell of a lot more. I'm not saying Monk is a good defender, but he's more reliable than Buddy Hield is, and he's proven that with the Lakers. He's become a very, very efficient shooter. He's shooting over 40% or just over 40% from three-point range so far this season. Now, to be fair, he's also playing alongside a guy like LeBron James, who does a phenomenal job drawing so much attention that Malik can basically prowl around the perimeter and not have to worry too much. But teams are starting to worry about him now because of how good he's been so far this season. I don't know what the cap situation is going to be like for the Lakers this upcoming offseason. I don't know if they're going to do everything in their power to try and re-sign Monk. And hey, maybe Monk decides to take less money to stay in LA to continue to play with LeBron and that team with championship expectations, even if this season hasn't gone so well to this point. But if Malik is available, and he will be an unrestricted free agent, I want to see Monte McNair getting involved in those sweepstakes, especially because I don't expect Buddy Hield to be on this team by that point. I would be very surprised if Buddy Hield is still a Sacramento King after the trade deadline, and the Kings could use some shooting to replace what you're losing in Buddy Hield. Malik Monk can provide that a whole hell of a lot better and more reliable, in my opinion, than Terrence Davis can provide that. So Malik Monk is definitely someone I would love to see the Kings target this upcoming offseason if he is available and if he decides not to return to the Lakers. And I'm curious your thoughts on that and how much you'd be willing to pay Malik Monk. I don't know if I'd pay him more than like $6 or $7 million, but maybe you do have to overpay slightly to convince him to come, because he's going to have more than just a couple suitors, in my opinion, when it comes to free agency this upcoming summer. So how do you feel about that? Let me know at Matt George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or feel free to leave your comments down in the YouTube comment section down below. While I was enjoying the Kings game tonight, I was snacking on a Built Bar, which is something that I do every single day. I make sure to always grab a Built Bar on my way to work, and I make sure to always have one or two at least at the end of the day. The only bad news about how reliant I am on Built Bar, I go through a Built Bar box way too fast. But the good news is there's always great deals at Built.com. I can use the promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off at Built.com. And there's so many different flavors that I can enjoy. Mint brownie is always my go-to, so I make sure I have a lot of those in my box. But I've been trying to branch out, try more flavors recently. I'm also a big fruit guy, so I love the raspberry. I love the orange. Built Bars are so wonderful. They're delicious, covered in 100% chocolate, and most importantly, they are good for you. They're protein bars that taste like candy bars. They have 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to most candy bars, which are around 240 calories and 30 grams of sugar. Yeah, that's a big difference. And Built Bars, they replaced candy bars truly. And you can take my wife's word for it. My wife loves candy bars. She loves chocolate bars. I didn't think she was ever going to find a healthy replacement for that. Built Bar has filled that void for her, and we're both very thankful for that. So use Built Bars to help you get through those New Year's resolutions. Maybe you're trying to put on some muscle weight. Maybe you're trying to lose weight. Maybe you're trying to just be overall healthier. Built Bar can help you with all three of those. Again, go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Let me know if you made some money on this Kings win over the Los Angeles Lakers tonight, and especially let me know if you made money on BetOnline, which if you're betting anywhere else, you're really hurting yourself, because BetOnline is the best place to do all of your sports gambling and the most fun place to do all of your sports gambling. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year. They continue the march to the playoffs and beyond, not just for the NBA, but for the NFL, college football. They have so much, not just football and basketball, but hockey, boxing, and UFC. Also have your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for all of 2022, because BetOnline is your number one spot for all the best sports wagering action this year. They've already claimed this year. It's a new year, a new updated desktop and mobile website for you to sign up today. Use a promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, all one word, to get a 50% welcome bonus. It's free money for you to make money with on BetOnline. They're the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So a 5-game losing streak is snapped, and now the Kings, looking at their upcoming schedule, have a chance to maybe tie some consecutive wins together. Now, you never want to forecast a Kings schedule and start predicting wins, because that's normally when the Kings get in trouble and Kings fans get pissed off. But looking at these next 2 games, you're taking on the worst team in the NBA, which is this Houston Rockets team that's 12-31 on the season. They did win their most recent game, so good for them. But they have been struggling. They're 2-8 over their last 10 games. A very beatable team. team, but also a team that can catch you by surprise if you go in there arrogant and cocky. A good opportunity for the Kings to put together a 3-game win streak, which they haven't been able to do in a while. And they need to take advantage of these games. They need to take advantage of these next 3 games coming up after those 2 meetings with the Rockets. They will host the Detroit Pistons on Wednesday, January 19th, because after that, things get a whole hell of a lot more difficult as the Kings will go on the road for a brutal road trip against the Bucks, Celtics, Hawks, 76ers, Knicks, and then they will host the Brooklyn Nets, followed by a game against the Warriors, and then they get the Thunder and the Timberwolves twice. So things are going to get difficult for the Kings coming up. Got to take advantage of these next 3 games. A 3 or 4 game win streak would do wonders for the Sacramento Kings. Let's take a peek at their standings. They are still, as of right now, out of the play-in, sitting in the 11th spot, a full game back of the Blazers in the 10th spot. Again, the Kings are 17-27 on the season. The Lakers are now in the 8th seed. They're a full 5 games ahead of the Kings, and the 6th seed, which is the most important seed outside of the top seeds in the West, is held by the Denver Nuggets. They are a whole 5. I'm sorry, I said the Lakers were 6 games ahead of the Kings. I meant they're 5 games ahead of the Kings. The Nuggets are 5.5 games ahead of the Kings in that 6th spot. That's all I'm talking about when it comes to the play-in. Again, I'm not allowing one game to change my perspective on anything. The Kings have a lot more to do to prove to me that they belong in any kind of postseason conversation, but that is your standings update for now. Also do have an update for you on Richaun Holmes. He was assigned to the G League Stockton Kings for some conditioning and getting back in shape recently. He was on the bench, but in street clothes for the Kings, so he has exited health and safety protocols, which is good news. He hasn't played a lot with his recent eye injuries and then entering health and safety protocols. We know how important he is for this Kings team. He is expected to return here relatively soon. No word on if he's going to be available for the Kings against the Houston Rockets. We'll have to wait and see with that. But any news, any kind of update that comes out of that, I'll be sure to share it with you when I find out that news and find out more information. Appreciate your support so much. I still have an upcoming podcast where we're going to talk about what if the Kings were to blow this team up and what a full-on rebuild would look like, what this team would have to do, the questions that they would have to answer, and how much they would simply have to get right in order to call this rebuild successful. There is a lot to talk about there. We're going to jump into those hypotheticals. So that's coming up a little bit later on. And then, of course, post-game podcasts after the Kings and Rockets game. So stick with me for all of that. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.